Long the shark tank of the MMA world, the lightweight division contained the deepest and most dangerous elite fighters of the 2010s. So today we're going to take a look back at the past decade and the best 155-pounders to make their mark. For SB Nation MMA, I'm Shakiel Mahjouri, and here are the top 10 lightweights of 2010 to 2019. Number 10, Michael Chandler. The three-time Bellator lightweight champion has had several stops and starts to his career. He laid claim to the Bellator lightweight title 3 times throughout the decade, beating Eddie Alvarez to claim it the first time in an instant classic. Even though he came out on the short end of the stick in their sophomore effort, it was a pretty damn good fight. Wins over Poirier and Benson Henderson were impressive for his resume as well. His accomplishments were enough that many believe he's the greatest fighter in the history of Bellator. Number 9, Justin Gaethje. It's hard to predict what Gaethje's record would have been had he fought competition closer to his level for the majority of his career, as opposed to doing his thing in the WSOF. Nonetheless, Gaethje won the first 18 fights of his career, defending the World Series of Fighting title a total of 5 times. He vacated it on his way to the UFC and developed a reputation as the most consistently exciting fighter of his time. No one else has ever won performance bonuses in their first 6 UFC contests. Since suffering his first 2 career losses, Gaethje has adjusted and made himself a better fighter, annihilating his next 3 opponents before the first round was out. Given the amount of damage he takes, we should enjoy Gaethje while we can. Number 8, Donald Cowboy Cerrone. There are 2 things Cowboy is known for: coming up short when the lights are brightest and being willing to throw down with anyone, anytime, anywhere. Cerrone fought 26 times at 155 during the decade, more than anyone else on this list. That isn't even counting the additional 10 times he fought at welterweight. It isn't like he's always lost when fighting the elite either. Cerrone captured wins over Alvarez and Henderson in the process and secured 11 of his 14 performance bonuses for the decade at 155. Believe it or not, Cerrone isn't quite done either. Number 7, Benson Henderson. Given his tendency to rely heavily on some favorable, sometimes questionable judging, many would have assumed that Henderson had gone away. Regardless, Henderson, like Pettis, was the WEC lightweight champion and the UFC lightweight champion. Unlike Pettis, Henderson was able to secure a defense of the WEC belt and deliver 2 more successful defenses of the UFC belt than Pettis did. Of course, Henderson also lost both of those titles to Showtime, which is why he's ranked lower than his counterpart. Overall, Henderson went 16-6 at 155 with wins over Cerrone, Gilbert Melendez, Nate Diaz, Frankie Edgar, and Josh Thompson amongst his victims. That's a resume that can't be ignored. Number 6, Rafael Dos Anjos. It looks like Dos Anjos may be nearing the end of the line as he has dropped 4 of his last 5. However, those were all at welterweight. What did Dos Anjos do at lightweight? Well, he went 13-5, captured the UFC lightweight title, and put a bad enough beatdown on Pettis when he wrestled the belt away from him that Pettis has never been the same. When Dos Anjos was at his peak, only the best of the decade were able to hang losses on him: Khabib, Tony Ferguson, and Eddie Alvarez. Had he been able to make it for a scheduled bout against Conor McGregor in 2016, the legacy of Dos Anjos would likely be very different from what it currently is. Number 5, Anthony Showtime Pettis. Anthony Pettis is a hard one to place. If we're going strictly off his performance over the first half of the decade, few can match, much less top, his accomplishments. He went 9-1, captured the WEC lightweight title, the UFC lightweight title, snagged 7 performance bonuses, and ended up on the Wheaties box. Then came the second half of the decade, featuring some dalliances at featherweight and welterweight. His record at lightweight 2-5, including what was officially a catchweight as Michael Chiesa missed weight. To his credit, Pettis never went down easy, but his poor second half of the decade can't be ignored. Unfortunately, many have forgotten just how awesome his first half of the decade was. Number 4, Dustin the Diamond Poirier. The Diamond only spent about half of the decade at lightweight, but he made the most of his time at 155. He went 11-3 with 1 no contest, with wins over several of his fellow competitors to be the best lightweights for the decade: Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Anthony Pettis, even Max Holloway in a lightweight contest. Jim Miller is also a notable name, and his win over Diego Ferreira is looking better all the time. Of those 11 wins, 8 avoided the use of judges. He also had a stretch of 6 fights where he took home 4 Fight of the Nights and a separate performance bonus. At 31, Poirier still has plenty of time to add to his overall legacy. Number 3, the Underground King Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez has had his shares of up and downs throughout the decade, but he was also the first fighter to hold titles in both Bellator and the UFC, making 2 claims on the Bellator belt. Even if he came out on the short end of the stick the first time he clashed with Michael Chandler, it was an all-time classic. Their second fight wasn't too bad either, which Alvarez did win. The Underground King was also the first to hand a loss to Dustin Gaethje. With his multiple title reigns in the top of 2 MMA organizations of the decade, it could be argued Alvarez was the most decorated fighter of the 2010s. Number 2, Tony Ferguson. There's a reason the UFC keeps trying to pit Khabib against Ferguson. Ferguson is currently riding a 12-fight win streak. The beginning of the streak featured some less than stellar opposition, but he's been disposing of some of the best of his division since then. Except for Khabib, of course. Regardless, names like Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, Kevin Lee, Rafael dos Anjos, and Edson Barboza have fallen to El Cucuy. Ferguson's confidence and creativity are unmatched, making it the most likely contestant to hang an L on Khabib, if they can ever make it to the cage. And number 1, Khabib Nurmagomedov. It's hard to argue with undefeated, and Khabib has never lost a fight in his professional MMA career. Adding to the already impressive feat is the manner in which Khabib has been decimating his opponents. Remember his 21 takedowns of Abel Trujillo? How about Khabib telling Michael Johnson he must give up because Khabib, quote, must be champion, all while pounding Johnson into the mat? Perhaps most memorable was his attack on Dillon Danis, which came only after Khabib forced Danis' teammate Conor McGregor to tap out in one of the biggest grudge matches in UFC history. It could be argued Khabib was the most dominant figure of the decade in all of MMA, and not just the lightweight division. And here are some honorable mentions: Conor McGregor, Frankie Edgar, Edson Barboza, Nate Diaz, Will Brooks, and Gilbert Melendez. McGregor did lay claim to the UFC lightweight title, but he only had 4 lightweight contests for the decade, going 2-2. Had Edgar spent more time at lightweight, he assuredly would be on the list. Barboza was the unsung hero of the division, fighting all the top guys, and coming up short. Diaz is a superstar, no doubt, but his excursions to welterweight and long absences hurt his resume. Brooks fell off a cliff after a stellar run in Bellator, and Gilbert Melendez may have been the best lightweight to open the decade, but he didn't maintain that status deep enough into the decade. Who do you think deserves to be crowned as the best lightweight of the 2010s? And better yet, who do you think will top the list across the 2020s? Someone on the existing panel or an entirely new entry? Let us know in the comments section what you think, and if you like this video, the best way you can help the channel grow is by tapping like and subscribe, and most importantly, hitting that notification bell. To everyone out there, stay safe and we'll catch you next time.